Hey everyone, it's Leah. All month we've been celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month. And today it's my turn to get vulnerable. So I'm going to share the story of how my challenges with anxiety jump-started my love and obsession with well-being and psychology and all of this work. I'll be sharing the key resources that help me deepen my understanding of anxiety and the practices that I use to work with my anxiety and to heal from it. That's coming up right after the break. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development show where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relation to others, and to the world around us. Before we start, I want to let you know that I'm going to talk about stress today. So if you've ever experienced stress, you'll get some really good info and powerful practices. But I am also going to talk about anxiety, which includes some tough topics. Specifically, I'm going to talk about something called unwanted intrusive thoughts, which can have triggering content. So please take care of yourself as you listen, but know that if you're struggling with anxiety or unwanted intrusive thoughts, this episode may be of real value to you. I will be using research from the ADAA, Anxiety and Depression Association of America, as I walk through this. I'll also speak from my own experience. But as always, you should speak with a professional or any number of professional services who help people going through this if you're really challenged by it. First, I want to start with a couple facts and figures just to get you grounded in the experience of anxiety and how many people go through it. So to be clear, stress and anxiety are different. The ADAA says that while everyone experiences stress, anxiety is a reaction to that stress. So it's almost like a compounding effect on top of stress. Now, when it comes to anxiety, there are a multitude of anxiety disorders, and anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States. They affect almost 20% of our population. So that's 40 million adults every year. Today, I will mostly be talking about general anxiety disorder, which the ADAA says affects 6.8 million adults, or about 3% of the population. Here's the kicker for me. Only 43.2% are receiving treatment, but this is absolutely treatable. One other note, the ADAA has found that women are twice as likely to be affected by this as men. So I want to call that out too. So hearing numbers like these can absolutely raise alarm bells, but I think it's a really powerful reminder that if you experience anxiety or other mental health challenges, you are absolutely not alone. I want to share that for so long, I did not talk about my anxiety. And when I say so long, I mean years. I didn't know where to find safe spaces to talk about it. And it wasn't until I started hearing, because I went looking for stories about other people's mental health challenges, that I felt seen and understood. So I'm going to start with my story, and the hope is that you find some resonance with it or something relatable. I personally have struggled with anxiety my entire life. And when I was little, my mom used to call me her little worrier. And the first thing I can remember worrying about were wildfires. And growing up in Northern California, unfortunately, fires are not an uncommon experience. We had friends who lost their homes. We were on the verge of evacuation at one point. I can even remember a birthday in preschool where there was a fire and coming back to cake that tasted like smoke. So as a kid, whenever I smelled smoke, I would go straight into a state of fear. Of course, that makes sense because for a little kid, fires are really scary, right? They're dangerous. But looking back with the understanding of my anxiety that I have now, I can see how maybe this fear was in overdrive. It was a little bit more than just a normal childhood fear. Now, as I got older, my anxiety seemed to get worse, and it started to manifest in new ways. It wasn't just a worry about fires or a mental thing. It also felt like a physical thing. And it probably always was, but didn't register, so more on that later. But I can remember as a teenager walking down hallways at school, starting to sweat, like really sweat. And I would feel a tightness in my chest, whether I was walking or sitting in class. And sometimes that tightness turned into sharp pains, and I would worry a little bit that something was wrong. Now, at the same time, I was also an athlete, so I noticed some of these symptoms when I was running track, during a meet, or during a race, or before a race. And I started to worry that maybe it had something to do with my heart. So I convinced my parents to take me to a doctor and get an EKG. Now, I went to the doctor and they measured my heart and did all the things and said, hey, everything's actually fine. You're in great shape, you're healthy. And so the conversation ended. And nobody suggested that I might have been experiencing a symptom of something like anxiety. And so for me, left without resources and with total trust in my doctor that maybe this just was a random pain or a benign body defect, anxiety continued to be part of my daily life. But I would push through it and ignore it because I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I was forced to really face the challenge with anxiety head on. So I had just moved into a new corporate apartment in Manhattan. And one day I was playing with my dog, Piper, and I was throwing her ball. And I had a balcony in this corporate apartment, and the ball rolled out onto the balcony. All of a sudden, when I was on my way to go get the ball, I had this terrified thought. My anxiety was really intense, and I was flooded with what I know now to be unwanted, intrusive thoughts. My thought was, oh my God, what if I jumped? Or what if something bad happened to me when I went out there? At the time, I had no knowledge, so this was a totally debilitating feeling. So much so, y'all, that I ended up crawling out onto the balcony and grabbing that ball in complete terror. I never went back on that balcony again. What I know now is that these are unwanted, intrusive thoughts. They have a name, they are a common experience, they are totally normal, and there are new ways to actually work with them to make them less upsetting. So if this sounds relatable to you, if you've ever had a thought like this before and been really bothered by it, just know you're not alone and know you can work with it. Now, as I said at the time, I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I did know there had to be a better way to live. Because I felt there had to be a better way to live, I resorted to something that I hadn't in a long time. I grew up Christian. I was at church most Sundays. And although I currently don't practice regularly today, one thing that has never left me is the power of prayer and meditation in my life. I found that at times when I needed support or just didn't know what to do, it helped me to simply ask for help or for guidance. And so that's what I did that day. I was really distressed, and so I fell to my knees and I said I needed help because I had to live a life where I did not fear my thoughts. And I will never forget what happened after that. That night I went on a walk with my dog in my neighborhood, and I had a gut feeling that I should open the podcast app, which I had never opened. Or maybe I had once before, because when I opened it, Oprah's was the only show that I had saved or that I was following. And that day, Oprah had a guest on named Marianne Williamson to talk about the 20th anniversary of her book, A Return to Love. I had never heard of Marianne Williamson and I had never heard of this book, but as I walked through the streets of downtown Manhattan and listened to her, she talked about a concept that really shook me. The concept is really simple. It's that everything you do is motivated by one of two things: fear or love. She says that love is what we are born with and fear is what we learn. And that just changed so much for me. It totally reframed how I had been running my life, which was from a state of fear. My anxiety, although not necessarily my fault, was a fear response. These thoughts and body sensations were not the person I was, but they were an experience I was having that was feeling like it was overtaking how I was running my life. And you know how someone just says something and for whatever reason, it just clicks? That was that moment for me. This realization that there were different ways to relate to what was going on in my mind was a huge, huge epiphany. And that's really the thing about anxiety that is so tricky. Understanding that things are happening in your head. They are not connected to the person who you are. Now, it might sound strange, but for the longest time, I did not get that there was me and then there were my thoughts. This is a tough thing for a lot of people to get. So I want to explain it to you in another way. If I asked you, are you your leg? You would look at me like I was insane and you would laugh. If I asked if you were your lungs, you would probably wonder if I needed help. Now, if I asked you if you were your head or your mind or your brain, you might pause for a second because you know how much you use your brain. But eventually you would again say, no, there's much more to me than just my head. So I'm going to offer this. We actually don't yet know exactly where thoughts come from. But I'm going to tell you that your brain is made up of neural networks. It's where your thoughts happen. And your brain is kind of like the hardware, and then the neural network is like the software of your brain. So imagine that your software is your thoughts. And I'm going to ask you, are you your software? And you're probably thinking, what? Of course I'm not software. Okay, here's the challenge. You are observing your software, which is a mix of unique experiences from your past, preferences, desires, a lot of things that make up your personality, right? And this is all so unique. I want to tell you how unique this is, because it's also going to help you understand how all of our software is different. That neural network has over 100 trillion connections. 100 trillion points where things connect, where thoughts happen and move, and where action, behavior, fear, worry, excitement, joy, all of these things are inspired. You have more connections in your brain than there are stars in 5,000 Milky Ways. So this software is pretty incredible, and it has bugs and kinks. It has things that if you could go to the tech lounge and get them upgraded, you would. One of my pieces of software I would get upgraded is procrastination. It's something I hate doing, but I do it. It's a habit I do over and over again. It's so easy, and it's part of my software. So if what I just described to you is checking out, if you have software, and you can think of the bugs and the kinks in your software, and you can think of the bugs and the kinks in your thoughts, the things you don't like to think, the things that aren't helpful to think, the things you know that if you didn't think them, you might do life a little bit differently. You might be a little bit braver, a little bit happier, a little more thoughtful. I want to ask you this. Why would you believe everything you're observing in that software? Why would you believe everything you think if you know it's simply a system that has a history that can be upgraded and changed? So after this walk in the park, I started diving into this work and searching for that better way of living that I knew was out there somewhere. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the better ways I discovered right after the break. Now I want to share some of the most important resources that I've relied on in my journey to understanding anxiety. And I'll put all of the links to the books, etc., along with those resources that I mentioned into the show notes, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. I just want you to understand what some of the biggest aha moments were for me, and I want you to have, of course, all of this information, all of these resources to go discover for yourself what is most helpful. Maybe the biggest aha moment came when I discovered the work of Dr. Russell Kennedy. He's a physician, a neuroscience expert, a somatic intuitive, a certified yoga instructor, and a meditation teacher who studies anxiety. And like so many people, he came to the work because of his own experiences with crippling anxiety. And he could not find an answer for himself or for his patients in the medical system that he was a part of. And like me, he felt like there had to be a better way, so he went out seeking answers. We're taught that anxiety is something that happens in our minds, but what Dr. Kennedy found from his research is that anxiety is also an issue of the body. The body has a ton of information, and even though I think a lot of us were taught to ignore it and focus really from the neck up, he would say that things like sweating or chest pain are actually the body communicating what he calls alarm. He says you don't just have anxiety, you have alarm. And that alarm can fuel the anxiety in your mind. So for me, I would feel tightness in my chest and I would start worrying. I'd start going over and over in my mind about what could be wrong. That would make the tightness worse, which would make the thoughts and worries worse. And so there is a relationship between body and mind when it comes to anxiety. And this really helped me understand that what I was working with was a system, not two separate challenges. So this was pivotal for me because instead of thinking something's wrong, I could actually understand that my body and mind were just informing each other in a cycle. And from that point for me, everything changed. And when I say everything changed, I want you to know I was not healed. I just realized that I had to look at this differently and I had to treat it differently. Now, if this resonates with you, I would highly recommend that you check out Russell Kennedy's book, Anxiety RX, his podcast, and his course. In it, he writes about breathing exercises, affirmative statements or questions to both notice alarm in the body and to calm it down. And he shares ways in which you can actually heal yourself from anxiety that he's found and that many people that he's worked with have found to be supportive. The other book I want to recommend is Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts by Dr. Martin Seif and Dr. Sally Winston. Now, what I love about how these two authors frame up unwanted intrusive thoughts is by first sharing that most people, more than 9 out of 10 people, experience intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts become a problem when they are unwanted thoughts or mental images that make you feel uncomfortable or disturbed. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a couple of intrusive thoughts that maybe you've had before. One example is, what if I hurt myself or someone else I care about? Another is, if you're religious, what if I yell blasphemies while the priest is talking during church or during service? Or what if I start dancing on a table in the middle of an important client meeting and we don't get the deal and then I get fired? Okay, you get it. These thoughts are thoughts that are absurd. They are thoughts that can even feel like impulses, but they are not. And for most people, when an intrusive thought enters their mind, they can say to themselves, that's weird. Oh well, and move on. But for some of us, these thoughts can get stuck. We can end up ruminating on them because of how uncomfortable they make us feel. And they make us feel so uncomfortable because they enter our minds at times or in ways that make us feel like it's out of character. They are so unlike the people that we are and the things that we value that we can't help but look at them again and again and again and worry about them. Worry about if something's changed about our character or who we are. This worrying and this rumination is something that the authors of this book call a sticky mind. So here's the thing I learned from the book Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts. Intrusive thoughts don't happen because you're a bad person or because you want bad things to happen. They happen oftentimes because of how much you care about the thing you're worrying about. So, for example, a love for life can make you absurdly worried about its end. A love for a pet or for a child, if you have a sticky mind, could become a pesky, unwanted, intrusive thought about the ways in which you could purposefully or accidentally put them in harm's way. So I want you to think of it not as a thought about who you are or a problem with you, but how much something matters to you and the fact that you perhaps have a sticky mind. That was so important for me to understand. It's changed how I look back at that moment on the balcony and other moments that have happened since then. So if you identify with any of this or the idea of having a sticky mind, a mind that ruminates and rolls things over and over again, I really recommend this book. And I also really recommend working with someone who knows how to work with unwanted intrusive thoughts. Okay, so those are some of the resources that have been most helpful to me in understanding my experiences with anxiety. And now I want to talk about a few of the techniques I use to help me when I'm feeling anxious, but also just in general to help support me wanting to heal fully from anxiety at some point. And let's start with the simplest one and move up from there so you can pick up wherever your level of involvement is today, and also just based on your needs and what's already in your toolkit or not. The first technique is something you can do totally for free, anytime, anywhere, and I bet you already know what I'm going to say. It's breathing. Now, what we do when we intentionally breathe as it relates to anxiety is we are turning our parasympathetic nervous system back on. Now, you have two systems that exist in your body, the sympathetic nervous system, which most people know as fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and then the parasympathetic nervous system, which people know as the rest and digest system. When you're in anxiety, your sympathetic nervous system is basically like clanging the alarm bell, saying that something's wrong, that you are threatened. That system gets louder and louder. Breathing can support you in turning on that rest and digest to balance and then quiet that system. If you think about it, when you're anxious, just notice the next time you're anxious, you probably are not breathing beyond your chest. You're probably taking really shallow breaths that go right into the center of your chest, and that's it. When you're relaxed, like when you're about to fall asleep or sleeping, you'll notice you're breathing much deeper. It's slower. Now, one of my favorite breathing exercises is called the 4-7-8 breath, which is 4 seconds of breathing in through your nose, 7 seconds of holding that breath, and then 8 seconds of breathing out. So let's try this out together. So you're going to breathe in to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out through your mouth for 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do it 2 more times. In for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just relax. Notice how there might be a little bit of a different feel after that. Okay, next we're going to talk about the physiological sigh, and I'm going to walk you through this one too. The technique on the physiological sigh is in quickly 2 times through your nose, hold, and then out through pursed lips, imagining that there's a tire deflating. So in, hold, and then out through pursed lips. Now, this exercise is also really powerful. It quickly brings you into relaxation. I will tell you when I do it, I notice that within, 4 to 5 breaths, I'm starting to feel a little bit like, ooh, out there. But it's turning your system back on and it's helping you relax. Now, one notch up from breathing exercises is meditation. And what I want to say about meditation is it's an ongoing practice that does not produce immediate results. Sure, you're going to feel calm probably after you do it, but it is a practice. There are times I meditate and I am not paying attention. My thoughts are racing too quickly. I have too much going on that day, and I've already sort of mentally jumped into the day. That doesn't mean that you failed, if that's you, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it again. It means you have to keep coming back to it because you are slowly training yourself to look at your thoughts from a distance, to tune in with body parts and breathing, and to quiet your mind. So it's a training program. It is not something that will produce immediate results. And yes, you will mess it up. Now, the next step up for me from breathing and meditation, or I don't even know that I'd say it's a step up, I'd say it's another thing I like to do, is called the emotional freedom technique, or tapping. And tapping is kind of like acupuncture, but it's acupressure because you're actually just using your fingers to apply pressure to points on your body. It is thousands of years old. It has similar origins to acupuncture, and there is so much to dive into here. But basically, there are multiple points on your body that you learn to apply pressure to. And when you tap on those points with your fingers, and you tap in patterns, and you tap also while repeating statements, you can help yourself reframe your thoughts. You can calm your body down. And there's a ton of research on how it also helps you retrain your brain to think differently, again, over time. Now, when I do this with tapping, the thing that I love and the reason I come back to it is as I tap and I repeat statements and I hit these points on my body starts to literally just completely shift downward and I can feel it. And one of the ways I know that this is happening is I just take these involuntary, really deep breaths. This is a super powerful technique. Again, totally free. But if you want to learn more, I'd recommend checking out Nick Ortner. He has a book called The Tapping Solution. He also has a website called thetappingsolution.com. And he has an app called The Tapping Solution. And then finally, an important resource here is, of course, seeking out professional support, like going to therapy. Now, therapy can be expensive. It can be difficult to find a therapist that works for you. But if you have the resources, I highly encourage you to go. I've gone to therapy for a long time, and I still go once a week because it's a really important space for me to understand myself and also to just have someone to bounce ideas off of and thoughts off of and try to make sense of certain things. And I want to just say this, you do not have to be sick to get better. I mean, think about it. If you had back pain, you would start to try to figure out what resources you had to keep the pain from getting worse. You'd go find a heating pad or ice. You would maybe take a little bit of Advil. You might start stretching. So what I'm saying about therapy is it's not all that different from getting a heating pad or doing some stretches when you have back pain. It's another resource that allows you to tackle challenges you're having in the moment and keep them from getting worse. So there's no shame around that. There's really only empowerment. The final thing I want to leave you with is that these tools are meant to accompany you on a journey. And that journey is probably a long one. Now, when I first started approaching my anxiety from a perspective of wanting to heal it, I just wanted it to go away. And it was only recently that I realized there probably is no final destination. I might always have a little bit of stress and a little bit of anxiety that simmers, but I can turn down the volume. And anxiety might always be a part of my life. I want to tell you, stress and anxiety could always be a part of your life. That doesn't mean that it's always going to be as emotionally difficult as it is today. It just means that as you work through it, you can focus on turning the volume down, not on completely stomping it out. And listen, if you are in the trenches right now, I want to remind you that just because you're struggling with something now does not mean it will always be this way. If you look back on anything you've ever done in your life, you'll notice how you've progressed. You didn't go from 0 to 100 or 100 to 0. And my acupuncturist used to always say this thing to me that I remind myself of, which is, in 30 days, you will feel differently. And I just love that. It's always true. If you were to set an alarm today for yourself 30 days from this moment, and then go work on your anxiety and your stress, use some of these tools, figure out some of the resources that you like most and check them out. Go find a therapist. I promise you, something will be different in 30 days. What might that be like in a year or in 5? I am so grateful that you're here. I am so hopeful that you learned something new, or at least felt like you found something resonant in this episode that's helping you think differently and more positively or hopefully about your experience of stress or anxiety. If this episode brought up new questions for you, or you want to share something about your journey with anxiety or stress, feel free to send me an email at everydaybetter@linkedin.com. You can also send me a direct message on LinkedIn, and I'd love to know what else you'd like to hear about on my next solo episode. So I look forward to hearing from you. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kutsniatsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.